Welcome to yet another fabulous video about the Constitution. Today we're going to look at the two political parties that popped up as we were trying to figure out how our Constitution was going to work. These are the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So let's get to it. The Federalists were a group of people who were in favor of ratifying the Constitution of 1787 as it was. Now, fun fact, our original Constitution did not include a Bill of Rights, okay? So file that in the back of your brain for a second. The Federalists believed that if we added a Bill of Rights to the Constitution, it would be dangerous. Now, why in the world would it be dangerous to write down specific rights that the people have that the government can't take away? Think about that for a second. Okay, your second step. The Federalists believed that if you wrote down specific rights that the people had, that the government or someone somewhere down the road might be able to say, oh, well, this specific right isn't listed in the Bill of Rights, therefore you don't have it. So for example, there is no amendment that says I have the right to drink coffee. Oh my gosh, could you imagine? But the Federalists argued that if you write down those rights and a specific thing isn't listed, then maybe you don't have that right. And they were afraid that writing down specific rights that the people have would unnecessarily and unintentionally limit the rights of the people. They also believed that the federal government should be given more power. Now you have to think, these people are coming from the Articles of Confederation when the federal government couldn't do anything. They couldn't even tax, okay? So they believed that in order for the federal government to kind of, do what it's supposed to do as a government, they needed to have lots more power, okay? So they were in favor of a stronger national government. They wanted to switch from a confederal system to a federal system like we have now. So some famous Federalists were John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay. James Madison was also a Federalist. He eventually flip-flopped and became a Democratic Republican, but we'll talk about that later. The Anti-Federalists then, of course, were the other group. They were in favor of a Bill of Rights. They said, if we are going to sign this Constitution, if we're going to make this the law of the land, then we have to have a Bill of Rights, because they thought the opposite of what the Federalists thought. They thought if you don't write down specific rights that the people have, then the government might try to take rights away from the people. So they saw writing down rights as a necessity. And they said, we're not going to sign this thing unless we have a Bill of Rights, okay? They also believed that the power of the federal government should kind of remain the same as it was under the Articles, because they were afraid of a super strong national government. They were afraid of a tyrannical government popping up, kind of like, what they had just left with Great Britain. And they wanted the states to retain most of the sovereignty. So they wanted to maintain that confederal system. And a few famous anti-federalists were Thomas Jefferson, also a guy named George Mason. So what do? We've got to come to some sort of compromise. We have to be able to mend our differences and move forward so we can establish a strong government. So the Federalists wrote a series of documents known as the Federalist Papers, in which they tried to convince the Anti-Federalists that this new federal system of government was going to be the best thing ever, and it was not going to infringe on the rights of the people, and people were going to be safe and all this kind of stuff. The Anti-Federalists, of course, as you can probably guess, wrote another series of essays, and they called them the Anti-Federalist Papers, in which they basically ripped apart the arguments of the Federalists. So how in the world did we come to a consensus? How were we able to kind of put our differences aside and do what was best for the United States? Well, the Federalists compromised and said, fine, we'll have a Bill of Rights, but there's going to be an amendment in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, that says just because a specific right isn't listed, that doesn't mean the people don't have it. And that's the 9th Amendment, which we'll look at here in a few videos. And the Anti-Federalists were like, fine, if we're going to put that in there, we're also going to add an amendment that says if a power is not given to the federal government and it's not denied to the state governments, then the state governments have it. And that's the 10th Amendment, and that's what's known as the States' Rights Amendment, okay? If you guys have any questions, let me know.